Okay, chapter 14. Marcel rode steadily along the main street until he reached the road that led out of town. This was the latest he had ever been out, and the truth was, it made him a little scared. Oh, sure, he had acted brave in front of his mother, and he really did want to be brave, but cycling out here with the wind hissing through the trees and not a soul around was pretty scary. A great spotted bird with an enormous wingspan swooped down very low, startling him as it passed. It was so close, he might have reached out to touch it. It flew away quickly, but he thought he recognized the ear tufts and the big orange eyes of an eagle owl. It was probably hunting, on the lookout for a rabbit or mouse as its late-night supper, and he was relieved when it was gone. To keep his spirits up, he pictured himself again in the Tour de France. Yesterday's ride was an exhausting stage of the race, but now he was on one of the last crucial stages, pedaling toward the final finish line, or what he hoped would be the final one. The fantasy helped him push through this fear. Marcel pedaled on, slowing down when he came to the bridge. Sure enough, it was manned by a pair of gendarmes. One was short and tubby, the other skinny and tall. He did not recognize either of them, and his heart sped up as he got closer. "You there!" called the chubby one. "Come over here." Marcel did as he was told. "What are you doing out at this hour?" said the soldier. "You should be home in bed." Marcel's heart was hammering. He did not want to say anything about looking for his father. If he did, the soldier might ask what he was doing out so late, and explaining that would put too many people he cared about at risk. "I'm going to see my grandmother. She's alone and she needs me." Marcel's actual grandmother lived far away in Lyon, so he did not think he was endangering her at all by saying this. Said the gendarme. "Still seems pretty late to me. You'd better turn around and go home." Marcel remembered the tin he carried in his satchel, and he dug inside to pull it out. "Here," he said, "I was bringing this to her, but you can have it. She really can't eat it anyway. She doesn't have too many teeth left." This wasn't true either, but how would the soldier ever find out? "Look at this," said the gendarme, opening the tin. "Turon." He took out a piece and ate it. "I haven't seen this in ages." "Don't eat it all," said the taller of the two. "You'd better save some for me." He reached for the tin, but his comrade held it out of reach. "Stop being so greedy. You'll get yours," said the chubby one. "There's a whole tin of it here." Marcel waited until the second soldier was chewing contentedly before he dared to ask, "Excuse me, sir, but please can I go now? My grandmother's waiting." "Go on, get out of here," said the chubby one. "And you'd better stay over at your grandmother's house. I don't want to see you back here tonight. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Marcel sped off, grateful to be free again. He kept going, alert to the subtle sounds of the night. Any of them might signal his father. Soon he saw something big looming up ahead. What if it was a checkpoint, and there were gendarmes who would stop and question him? He had nothing to give them. Nothing! Then something began to move, shifting and neighing in the dark. Could it be? As he got closer, he saw that it was Lulu, the speckled mare that pulled the bakery wagon. What a relief! He'd made it! He had ridden through that last terrifying stage in the dark and all alone. Now he'd crossed the finish line in his mind, and there, just beyond it, was his father. Marcel pulled up close to the wagon and practically tossed the bicycle aside. "Papa!" he called, but softly, so as not to alert any soldiers who might have been passing through the area. "Papa, it's me!" "Marcel!" Papa jumped up and brushed off his hands. "I can't believe you found me. How did you know to come looking?" "I remembered the last time you had trouble with that wheel. I told Mama it might have happened again." "You were right," Papa said. "I was so focused on getting your friend and her family out of town that I forgot about that pesky wheel. I didn't bring my tools with me, and now I'm stuck." "I brought your tools, Papa," said Marcel. He shrugged his satchel from his shoulders, opened it, and dumped the tools onto the ground. "Thank you, Marcel," Papa said. "Now I can fix it and we can be on our way home." "How can you work in the dark?" Marcel asked. "I have no choice," his father said. "A light might attract attention, of the wrong kind." While Papa worked, Marcel asked about Delphine and her family. "I brought them to the house in St. Giron's. Tomorrow they'll head into the mountains, and if they're lucky, cross the border." "Unless they get caught," said Marcel. Unless they get caught, said Papa. But I think their chances are pretty good. The guide who's taking them is experienced. He'll do his best to keep them safe. When Papa had finished fixing the wheel, Marcel told him about what the soldier had said. We'd better hide you. And this, his father said, hoisting the bicycle up and into the wagon. Now you hop in too. Once Marcel had positioned himself next to the bicycle inside the wagon, his father covered him with the tarp and arranged the sacks of flour and grain around him. He was well hidden from view. Then Papa climbed up to the seat and gave the signal to Lulu. The wagon jolted slightly, and they were off. Marcel could not see anything as they rose, but he was aware of when the wagon stopped at the bridge, and some muffled words were exchanged between his father and the soldiers. He must have given them some of the bread that Mama had packed. The wagon started moving, and Lulu kept up a steady, rhythmic pace. It was late, well past midnight, and Marcel was tired. He let his eyes close, and he drifted into sleep. The next thing he knew, Papa was pulling back the tarp and helping him down from the wagon. Mama was awake and waiting for them when they came into the apartment, relieved that they were home. Then Marcel went straight to his room and sank into the deepest of sleeps. In the morning, he still felt weary from all the activity of the night before. He went to school anyway, determined not to let his attention lapse. He didn't want his teacher singling him out again. But Mademoiselle Babineau seemed more interested in Delphine's empty seat than anything else. Does anyone know where she is? She asked. No one in the classroom raised a hand. Then she turned directly to Marcel. Marcel, do you have any idea? Unable to look at her, he stared down at the top of his desk. No, Mademoiselle Babineau. Marcel felt uncomfortable. He liked his teacher and had never lied outright to her before. And she had protected him yesterday. But what else could he do? Are you sure? She asked. Yes, mademoiselle, I'm sure. There was a long moment when nothing was said. He waited for her to challenge or scold him, but it did not happen. She turned her attention to the lesson on math, and Marcel felt like he could breathe again. It turned out that the subject of Delphine's absence was not closed, though. At recess, Theory came swaggering up to him at the lunch table. I don't believe what you told the teacher. Everyone knows you were friends with that Jew, and I bet you know where she's hiding. I do not, stammered Marcel, who just wanted to keep his distance. Liar! Liar! Theory began to chant. He was standing over Marcel, and his big, bulky body kept Marcel from standing up and leaving the table. Marcel was getting more and more nervous when all of a sudden Guillaume and Arnaud came over. Leave him alone, Guillaume said. Why should I? Said Theory. He turned to Marcel. Jew lover, he taunted. He is not, said Arnaud, at least no more than any of the rest of us. So he was friendly with her. Big deal. Big deal is right. Marcel was surprised at how strong and confident his own voice sounded. She was the best cyclist around here, he added. She beat all of us in a race, and she knew more about cycling than anyone, more than me, and certainly more than you. She could have beaten you in her sleep. He looked up, no longer afraid, at Theory. So don't let me hear you talking about her anymore. Understand? To his surprise, Theory moved back a step or two, and then he turned and lumbered awkwardly back to his seat at a different table. Jew lover, he muttered again, but he'd clearly been surprised by Marcel's newfound courage. Arnaud and Guillaume sat down next to Marcel. You're right about Delphine, said Guillaume. That girl could really ride. She sure could, added Arnaud. Then he looked over at Theory. I don't think he's going to bother you anymore. He's just a big bully, and bullies can never stand a taste of their own medicine. Marcel smiled. It was good to have his friends back on his side again. With Delphine gone, he'd been feeling really alone. He wondered for the 10th, 20th, 30th time where and how she was. Did she and her family find another safe place to stay? Were the truck and chickens all gone? Were they on their journey now? Had they been able to avoid getting caught? There was no way to know. After school let out for the day, he did something he knew he was not supposed to do. He pedaled by the house where Delphine and her family had lived. He took care not to be seen, and he made it look like he was just riding around, not that he was there for any special reason. He could see through the windows that the furniture and dishes were still there. Clothes and books, too. That made sense. Delphine and her parents had each taken only one small knapsack, no more than that. But seeing the house, Marcel could almost imagine that they would walk back in and resume their lives again. Of course, he knew that wasn't going to happen. They were on their way to Spain now, trekking through the mountains, alert to every sound they heard, every shift in the leaves they saw. Marcel hopped off his bike and wheeled it over to the bushes, where he hid it. He didn't want to draw any extra attention to himself. Then he began walking around looking for something he could not name. The red bicycle was gone, sold. He already knew that. So what was he doing here? What did he hope to find? Some distance from the house was a shed. The door was open, and he stepped inside. Not much of interest in here. A basket of moldy-looking turnips, a banged-up pot, a rusty shovel, just stuff no one wanted. It looked like it had been here for years and years. But then his eye was caught by something that looked newer than everything else. A lumpy package wrapped in a fairly new sheet of newspaper. He picked it up and opened it. Inside was the shiny silver bell that had been attached to Delphine's red bike. He recognized the bell right away, since he had so admired and envied it. She must have left it for him to find. Then he turned to the wrinkled piece of newspaper and smoothed it out. It was a page from the sporting section about the famous Belgian cyclist Silver Mace. Mace had won the Tour in 1939, and even though the race had been canceled this year, the article talked about what he was doing now to stay in shape and what his future racing plans looked like. Of course, that's what Delphine would have chosen to wrap the bell. It was perfect. He rolled up the paper into a small tube and put it carefully into his satchel along with the bell. He could only hope Delphine and her family were finding their way on the dangerous mountain path and that there would be a safe place for them on the other side. Marcel was just about to hop on the bike and head for home when he saw a ginger cat sitting by the stone step in front of the house. Was this Delphine's cat? Her coat was dirty, but he was pretty sure he recognized the darker orange stripes on her body and her white front paws. "Here, kitty," he said, and to his surprise she came right over and delicately sniffed the hand he extended. Then she looked at him with her big amber-colored eyes, and when he was close enough, allowed him to stroke her head. "You're a good kitty, aren't you?" he asked. He had promised Delphine his family would take her cat, but he hadn't been able to keep his promise then, and he couldn't do it now because he couldn't ride home with a squirming cat in his arms. He set her down and got back on his bike. His mother fried a small fish for dinner, and afterward Marcel walked back to Delphine's house with a bit of the fish skin wrapped in brown paper. He set it out on the ground and waited. Sure enough, the cat came over, and when she had finished eating, he scooped her up. She squirmed a bit, but he held on tight and would not let go until he had carried her safely home.